Well, here we are. We are just over 3 weeks away from NFL Draft Weekend 2024. It's the month of April, and this is Jonesing for Football. Bill Jones with young Cody Winstead. And Cody, we have a special guest on this edition of the show.
He is back. That's right. He is one of my favorite people in the business, a great friend, a great football reporter, not only covering the Patriots, but the entire NFL. Let's welcome back our buddy, Mike Giardi from the Boston Sports Journal. Thank you for joining us today here on Jonesing for Football. It's good to see you, my friend. I miss you.
Yeah, it's good to see you guys as well. I didn't think I was going to get the call back. I thought you lost my number. I was a little concerned, but nice to be back.
Yeah, that's not the case at all, Bill Jones, right?
The way I was on the Patriots bandwagon last season, I wasn't sure that I wanted to hear from Mike Giardi again this offseason because I knew it would come back up. How much I thought that the Patriots were going to make the playoffs last year because, of course, they've got Bill Belichick on their side. Well,
mistakes were made. That's just, we don't get them all right. If we did, we'd go to Vegas, we'd load up on it all, we'd be rich, and we wouldn't be doing this anymore.
Well, tell the truth, Bill Jones. I actually did get it right. I think Bill said 9 or 10 wins into the playoffs. I actually did get it right. Every other person said 6 or 7 wins like I did, and then they ended up being correct. But we know that's fine. This is a new year, though, for the Patriots. And I want to get into some draft stuff with you, Giardi, if you don't mind. Let's start. Before we get into the Patriots at number 3, let's start big picture with these 3 quarterbacks at the top: Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, Jayden Daniels. How do you rank those guys that are likely to go at the top of the draft?
Yeah, to me, Caleb's been a no-doubter. And I know much like Drake Maye didn't have the same kind of year he did the year before when he won the Heisman. But if you look at that team, what was surrounding him, the offensive line, a defense that couldn't stop anyone. They had to fire their DC, 2/3 of the way through the season. It became a situation where it was almost like, I got to put up 50. And if I don't put up 50, we don't have a chance to win. Drake Maye went through the same thing in North Carolina. So to me, I know there are some concerns about Caleb off the field, just in terms of his father's involvement. And, I don't know. I heard someone say he wants to be the Jay-Z of the NFL. Be nice if you could actually establish yourself as a star before you try to do that. But I think he has all the necessary talents to be, the runaway number 1 pick, which you will be in Chicago, and to be a real franchise player. So to me, that's been a no-brainer despite all the other stuff. Maye and Daniels are the interesting ones to me. I think Daniels is more ready to play right now. Obviously, 50-something starts in college, dating back to being a true freshman at Arizona State, 3 years there, transfers to LSU, has a good first year at LSU, probably is a 3rd-round pick, and then blossoms this year, wins the Heisman, and now we're talking, easy top 5 pick. Weight's a concern, right? He was 210 at his pro day. Nobody I talked to that was at the pro day believes he's a 210-pound player. He's just one of those guys who's going to settle in. Maybe he settles in at 200 as versus 190, which is what he played at LSU. So that's, I think, one of the big concerns for him is just physically, will he be able to hold up? But for him, he might already be at his ceiling or something close to it. I think because of all the games that he's played, because of the kind of player he is. But I think that's the kind of guy that can come in right away. And at least if you're, say, Washington, picking 2, and you decide you want that guy that's ready to go right away versus Drake Maye, who might need a little bit more seasoning, then to me, it's Daniels. And then Maye, I mentioned it, Caleb Williams, Maye, they had similar years in terms of they were much better the year before than this year. He got into some bad habits, much like Williams did. Drifts a little bit too much in the pocket, struggled a bit against pressure. But he attacks the middle of the field better than pretty much any quarterback in this draft. And to me, that's a really important thing, the willingness and the success throwing the ball over the middle of the field. I feel like that's been a good sign that the quarterback can be successful at the next level. I just think he's got to clean some stuff up. I think they went different coordinators this year. He lost 181 targets from his first year as a starter to this year in terms of guys graduating to the NFL, Tank Dell being one of them. He might take a little longer, and I think that's okay. I look at the Josh Allen comparison. I know people have made the Justin Herbert comparison, and I'm not saying it's apples to apples, but Allen, 12 games as a rookie, completed 52% of his passes. Started the full season, the second season, completed 58. So it was a good jump, but not the jump that you need. And then, of course, as we know, year 3, he did something that nobody expected him to do. He completed around 70% of his passes. I don't know that Maye has that same kind of athleticism and arm, but I kind of foresee the same thing. Like, play him some in his rookie year. It's not going to be awesome. Second year, you'll start to see things, the dividends pay off. And then hopefully by year 3, you have the guy that you're going forward with for the next 10 years.
Well, when you were talking about Caleb Williams, it brought back some bad memories of me. For me, I'm an OU alum, and so Oklahoma, there was Lincoln Riley teams. You're talking about the bad defense that USC had. That Caleb, I feel for Caleb Williams because it was a lot like what Kyler Murray went through at Oklahoma, what Baker Mayfield went through at Oklahoma, where they literally had to score every time they had the football because the defense was so bad. And so that's what Caleb Williams was up against when he was at SC. It is interesting from the New England perspective here because, of course, you've got Chicago picking number 1. You've got Washington picking number 2. You just, on Boston Sports Journal, released your own mock draft. Is this the first mock draft that you've done?
That is the first one. Yes, it is.
Okay.
No trades in this one. No trades. This was just straightforward pick of the team that's there.
The first of what will be, I assume, several mock drafts.
Yes, sir.
Trying to catch every scenario before draft weekend. So New England picks number 3. So how do you think it's going to fall without any trades?
So I think my read on it at this point is that Washington is looking for, it's the new ownership thing, right? You want the splash. And to me, the splash is Jayden Daniels. We've heard the comparisons to Lamar Jackson, or if you want to go further back, Randall Cunningham, like someone who brings instant electricity to that stadium that, up until the past year, nobody even wanted to go to the games. I think he's someone who can come in. He's going to play right away. He's got some good pieces around him, obviously, McLaurin, Jan Dotson, the wide receiver out of Penn State. So there are players that he can, sort of grow with. And I just that's my sense right now, is that Daniels is the pick. And then that leaves the Patriots saying, do we want more of the project in Drake Maye? There's some talk about JJ McCarthy recently as well. I just think it's too. I've heard the argument like their roster isn't ready for a young quarterback, and you risk ruining the young quarterback. Well, they went out and hired Alex Van Pelt, who's done a really good job with quarterbacks over the course of time, including this last year where he had 5 quarterbacks ready to play for Cleveland because of the injuries to Deshaun Watson and then so on and so forth. And he got them ready to play and got them into the postseason, sort of coaching those guys up. I think, okay, you chose Alex Van Pelt as your offensive coordinator. Let him work with the kid. Let him mold him. Let him get some of the bad habits and coach him out of them. And when they're coached out of him, then the kid can go play. Until then, he's going to continue to watch, grow, and learn. I just feel like when you're in this position, they should be better than they were, even though they haven't really done much. Just you're going to add some with the draft, and I think they'll get a little bit of a new coach bounce. There's a new energy around the team, and even if you're winning 6 games or 7 games, then all of a sudden you're picking 9th, 10th, and then we don't have the quarterback. We want to move up the quarterback, and then you're going to end up having to use 3 first-round picks to move up and get back into the top 3, which is where you were this year. And by the way, at least at this point, when we look at the quarterback draft next year, we say it's not even close to the one that there is this year. So there's always a guy or two that might emerge in that process. But I just feel like you're here now, take the guy now, grow with him, and you just have to, there's going to have to be some patience, which Patriot fans aren't often known for. The media not often known for, but I think that's the process that you have to go through here.
To your point, Giardi, I looked it up. I was thinking, when's the last time the Patriots even drafted this high? And it's 1993 when they took Drew Bledsoe number 1. So that's the last time they took a top 3 pick. So to your point of, hey, we're here now. My good friend Bill Jones is on record saying Marvin Harrison Jr. is a future Hall of Famer. So you could be passing up, really good players if you do go quarterback, and obviously quarterback is understandable. But do you think there's a chance the Patriots either trade out at number 3 or maybe stick and pick and go with someone that's a non-QB?
I could see them trading out. when I look at it, they need quarterback, they need multiple wide receivers, they need a left tackle. If I'm not gonna pick a quarterback in this draft and I'm not gonna move too far back, then to me, you're picking the left tackle. Like, I think Joe Alt has the potential to be a 10-year guy at left tackle, potential, Pro Bowl, All-Pro type player, maybe long-term Hall of Fame type guy. I think that's something for me that's harder to find than receiver. I think we look at this draft. I've had different organizations tell me they have as many as 18 guys in the top 100 at wide receivers. And I've heard on the low end 14 or 15. Well, that's still a pretty sizable number. And look, not all of those guys are going to be Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze. But if you get 85, 90% of that, and you're picking it in the second or third round, and you can still get your tackle or your quarterback up top, that's what I think you have to do. I think clearly Minnesota must have a good idea that someone in the top 5 is willing to move. Otherwise, I don't think they would have done what they did to get the second first round pick. And then, I know being at the owners' meetings, the league meetings rather, Kevin O'Connell was trying to push the notion that like 2 first round picks in this draft is more valuable than in next year's draft, just because we're pretty high on the draft and some of the positions in the draft, tackle, wide receiver, quarterback being the 3 that really stand out. And I wondered if he was sort of setting the table for, we're not going to offer the 3rd first round pick to move up, which I think if you kind of go back and look at some of the quarterback trades recently, Trey Lance being one of them, it's taken the 3rd one. So I don't know if there's a battle line being drawn there, but I could see them, if there's a Godfather offer, being like, all right, look, maybe we take one of the 2nd tier quarterbacks either later in the first round because it's 11 and 23 for Minnesota, or try to get them early in the 2nd round. They have picked 34 and do it that way, and hey, if the guy doesn't work, then yeah, we're back in the quarterback market, but at least we got a couple first round picks or a couple of high value prospects early on in the draft before we took our shot at quarterback.
Let's look at the second tier, the quote unquote second tier of quarterbacks. And to your point on what the Patriots might do at 3 or any of those teams up there, the second tier of quarterbacks being JJ McCarthy, who some are saying could move up into the first tier of quarterbacks. Then you got Bo Nix from Oregon. You got Michael Penix from Washington. I'm thinking, I'll let you kind of rank those guys where you see those guys fitting in. But I'm thinking, to the point of the Patriots, with 6 quarterbacks projected perhaps to go in the top half of the first round, we'll see where they wind up going. I'm thinking as they evaluate these guys, they're going to fall in love with one of the guys. And so trading back on the risk that we might not have that guy we've fallen in love with, it's doubtful, picking at number 3, that they would trade out of that. They're gonna like one of these guys, you would think.
I mean, if you're them, that's what you're hoping for, right? You're hoping that during this process, one of these guys, or maybe even multiple, right? Because you're sort of still dependent on what Washington does at 2, whether it's Daniels or they go May, or maybe they fall in love with JJ McCarthy and all of a sudden he's the one that slides in there, and you're, oh wait, Jayden Daniels might be available. How do we evaluate Daniels versus May? Those sorts of things. But I mean, they've been omnipresent in all of these things, with the exception of Michael Penix. They had their director of college scouting was there, but none of I guess he's part of the big brain trust, but the rest of the big brain trust was elsewhere. So either they're playing a game with Penix and they really like him and they just don't want to tip their hand as we go through this process of the lying season, or they just look at him and say, the medicals aren't great. He doesn't fit what we want to do. And, we're not going to spend as much time working on him as we are working on those other guys. The McCarthy thing is interesting to me. And I think I'd be shocked now if he doesn't go top 10, right? I just think that's just, never mind the media thing. You talk to people from the league and from different teams, and they're like, there's a lot of love for this player. I watch him and I say, he's like a 2nd round pick. That's what he sort of profiles to me as. And that doesn't mean when I say he's a 2nd round pick that he can't be a great player, can't be a starter for the next 10 years. Jalen Hurts is a 2nd round pick, ends up getting the max contract essentially 2 years ago after leading Philly to the Super Bowl. Like, there's definitely that possibility, but they didn't rely on him at all. I mean, so much of what they did was run the football and defense. And yeah, in clutch moments, he was really good, outstanding on 3rd and 4th down. I think he had the best completion percentage on 3rd and 4th down of all the quarterbacks that we're talking about here, the 6 or 7 quarterbacks, if you want to throw Spencer Rattler in there as well. So there are things to like. It just feels like he has, like May, he has a ways to go before he's ready to play right away. And there are certain things that he's going to have to really improve upon if he's going to be that guy. Penix, I could watch Penix throw all day. And I spent a lot of time just watching the Washington offense because they have the 3 receivers, they have the tackle. Like, there's a lot of good players on offense, and their offense is really fun. The offensive coordinator now is with the Seahawks, so I'm really interested to see how that sort of plays out, because they do a lot of different things that, everybody's trying to look for a different edge, and they found some edges at Washington. Penix has when he's on time, he puts the ball where he wants. He has that 3-quarter delivery. It's kind of odd, but he slingshots that sucker in there. Like, you just find the ball on time a lot. His issue is, in talking to people around the league, is when it breaks, the initial read breaks down, or when there's some sort of pressure and he's moved off his spot. A short circuit is probably a little too strong, but sometimes it falls apart quickly on him in that regard, and then he's far less accurate. And, like, look, guys get moved from the pocket, they tend to be less accurate. But it just seemed like for him, I don't know if it's a fatal flaw, but it's a definite flaw, and whether he can correct that as he goes to the next level, I don't know. But I really do love watching him throw. He's something, and those receivers are something. Nix is capped out. I mean, that's the way I view him. I think he's played a ton of games, like Penix has, like Jayden Daniels is. But we're talking someone who didn't want to push the ball down the field. It's first read, get it out quickly. Like, and there's a lot to be said for that. I'm not saying that necessarily is a criticism. I just think who he is and what he profiles is that you may already see what he is, and there's not much room for him to get better than he is.
All right, I got one more thing on Nix. I have fallen in love with Nix the way he talks. And I guarantee you there are a lot of coaches. I mean, that guy has a knowledge of the game, and I guarantee, he's been projected maybe that Sean Payton will fall in love with him because of that. But I agree with everything you said about Nix. The funny thing on Nix is I'm sitting there going, okay, I would love to have him in my quarterback room, and I think that he can be in the league for 10 years. I just don't know whether he's going to be a starter for 10 years or he might be Colt McCoy.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually a great comparison. And look, he has some really good traits. I mean, he's really athletic. He's a creative player, creative thrower. Like, you can go look at some of the highlights. He makes some plays, where it's off, out of structure and like running around and like about to get hit, and like he makes a really accurate throw. Like, that's in him. It just, the unwillingness to want to push the ball to the deeper quadrants of the field very often. I don't know. I think it says something about how he feels about his arm strength and also like trying to mitigate the risk. Now, if you're a coach who doesn't want risk, he's probably your guy, right? Because he definitely wants to take the first read and the shorter stuff. But yeah, I think there is. To me, it's more likely a scenario that he's a backup in the league for a long time. We'll start some games and maybe has a couple moments, but in general, like, okay, what he projected out coming out, like, that's what he became. And I like Rattler. I want to throw him in. He's not a good athlete, like, relatively speaking. And I heard someone say sort of like the poor man's Baker Mayfield. Mayfield used to run around a little bit in college, right? And you'd be like, dude, you can't do this at the next level. And then he would get to the next level and he's like, oh, you're right, I can't do this at the next level. I can't beat the edge guy to the corner because the edge guy is running a 4.5 and I run a 4.8. Like, Rattler's that same kind of athlete. But in terms of his arm, he is just a pure thrower of the football. Like, watching him drive the ball at the Senior Bowl, and then like, okay, maybe I got to go back and watch him. Maybe I have sort of my recollection of what he is versus what I'm seeing here. And then you watch what he did at South Carolina, where they never had the same offensive line the entire season. It changed week to week to week. It was a different unit every week. And he was under siege, and he dealt with pressure. He stood in the pocket and took a beating, and he delivered throws on time accurately. Like, he's probably the same sort of thing where he's not going to be a long-term starter, but you could do a lot worse if he's in your room and you have to go to him at some point to pick you up for a few games, because like I said, he really throws the hell out of it.
He might wind up in a better spot than the guys that are going in the first round, because there's a team that can take him in the third round or so.
Yep.
But to your point, his talent, there's a reason he was a 5-star guy coming out of Phoenix in high school.
And he seems to have, like he has the, he was on that Netflix show, and, he gets suspended for, him. Yeah, right. Like he's grown up.
Yes,
that
exactly.
we were looking at a 17-year-old kid, Dan. He's 23 now. He's been through the grinder a little bit. He's had to transfer. He got beat out by Caleb Williams. He didn't live up to the potential when he was at Oklahoma, all those sorts of things. And he held it together at South Carolina without a ton of talent around him. He had Leggett. He was throwing to Leggett, but that was pretty much it. And he had a really good season. So, yeah, he's an interesting one for me.
Giardi, I'd like to follow up on JJ McCarthy, because you mentioned him a couple times now. Let me give you the last 6 games of JJ McCarthy's career, by the way. So this is like peak end of where we are with JJ McCarthy. Last 6 games. I'll start with Washington, the championship game, and work my way down. Washington, he had 140 passing yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 picks. Bama, he had 221 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 picks. Iowa, 147, 0 touchdowns, 0 picks. Ohio State, 148, 1 touchdown, 0 picks. Maryland, 148, 0 touchdowns, 1 pick. Penn State, and this is the game I can't get over. 60 passing yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 picks, and 0 passes in the second half of an important game. Go ahead, Bill Jones.
Let me throw one more thing in there. And by the way, the one game where it was on his shoulders to throw the football a lot against TCU the previous year in the Fiesta Bowl, he threw 2 pick sixes in that game. He did throw for a lot of yards in that game, but there were a couple of pick sixes in there too.
Yeah, exactly. So I went back to the Penn State game. Again, I can't get over this. If you're a trusted quarterback or and you're a top prospect, and your team doesn't trust you to throw 1 pass in the second half of an important game that's very close. There was a 3rd and goal on the 10. They ran it. It set up a field goal. There was a 3rd and 6. Michigan ran it. There was a 3rd and 10. Michigan ran it. Those were all in the second half. And so now you're telling me that this guy who was a borderline first-round pick is now a potential top 3 pick. I'm not buying it. Giardi, are there fans in New England who think that he might be the guy at number 3?
Yeah, and well, first of all, as you well know, and you're a college football watcher, as am I, in this region, nobody cares about college football. Boston College and UConn are your 2 premier programs, and neither one of them are even. I should be launched off the podcast for even using premier with those 2 programs. Like, every once in a blue moon, BC had Matt Ryan, whatever that was, 17 years ago, where they were the number 2 team in the country for whatever into week 10 or week 11 before settling right about where they belong. Right. So nobody really has any clue about these guys. They watch Michael Penix in the semifinal game, and the radio hosts up here are absolutely out of their mind about Penix. You got to draft Penix. Penix is the best player. Like, I can't believe they wouldn't draft Penix. And then Penix falls on his face in the final, in the championship game. No. I still believe in Penix. I still believe in Penix. You watched Penix play twice. You saw him play a great game, and you saw him play a not so great game. And you don't want to contradict your initial takes. You're gonna ride with it. McCarthy he's tough. He's athletic. I mentioned the 3rd and 4th down stats. There's some good numbers. He throws the ball over the middle of the field. Some of these quarterbacks don't. Jayden Daniels does not attack the middle of the field. McCarthy, I think, is behind Drake Maye of the tier of guys we're talking about in terms of throwing the ball and having success throwing the ball in the middle of the field. So there are things that are definitely first-round worthy, or things that would get you excited about him. But like I said, the profile, and you just went through it, 6 games. And not putting it on him. And look, their team was so good. Their argument is, well, we didn't have to, right? That's great. But if Jim Harbaugh is as nutso about McCarthy, the best quarterback, he's had the best workout, he's this, that, the other thing, you'd have thought maybe at some point it would have been like, hey, you know what, JJ, it's you and me today. I'm going to let you show everybody what you're capable of, because I'm not worried that you're going to blow this for us, because you're so good, you're going to light it up, and you're going to have that game on your resume. And when people say, should he be a top 5 pick? Yeah, when he threw for 350 against that Iowa defense that nobody could move the ball on, like, that's when we let him see it. He didn't do it. So that's why I say, to me, he fits as a second round profile guy. Like, there are things you like, but there are a lot of questions you have answered. Like, I could see Rattler in the second round. What's the biggest question? The athleticism and the size. Can he overcome that at the next level? Well, McCarthy, can he become the guy that the entire thing revolves around, when in college, when he's supposed to be the big man on campus, it didn't revolve around him.
Yep. And just to follow up, 3 300-yard passing games out of 40 college games. He threw for 300 or more yards 3 times. The other thing that I don't know if your people in Boston know about as much, Michigan is loaded. As an Ohio State guy, I'm willing to admit Michigan was loaded.
Wow.
Nobody had it easier than JJ McCarthy. They had 2 great running backs, a good wide receiver, one of the best defenses in the country. And how about this? They had 6 offensive linemen at the combine. Michigan had 6 offensive linemen at the combine. So this guy's job was super easy. And I also thought they did a really good job of motions and different types of formations to really keep defenses off balance. And you said he's great on 3rd and 4th down. That's because it's always 3rd and 1. It's 3rd and 2 because they have great lines and great run games. That's why he's so good on those downs.
Yeah, right. Look, I can't. I would have a hard time if they made that pick at 3. I just, and here's the other part of it too that you hear a lot, and I'm unfortunately, I guess people still think this way, including in the league. He's a winner.
Yeah. That's a thing. That's weird.
I heard that a lot from, I'm not talking about reporters. I'm talking about actual people that work for teams at the league meetings. And I'm like, yeah, so was Tim Tebow. Like, Tim Tebow might have been the greatest winner in college football history. That didn't make him a good pro. I don't, obviously McCarthy's a better thrower of the football than Tim Tebow, but like, you get my point. Like, that only goes so far.
And so was Mac Jones. He was a winner, right?
Didn't lose a game. 14-0. Best offensive performance by a college football team maybe ever. Him and LSU and with Joe Burrow. So yeah, that didn't work either.
And now he's the backup quarterback in Jacksonville. All right, non-QBs are a couple of guys maybe that you like, and I want to pose this also for our Dallas audience here. Cowboys are picking 24th. Is there a guy that you see could fit in Dallas as well?
Well, how about, let me just give you a little intrigue, right? So we know that the Dak Prescott contract situation is sort of at a standstill. And I think more and more people around the league are thinking like he might actually be a free agent at the end of this year. Like, that actually may happen. What about drafting Michael Penix at 24? All right, you have the leverage, right? Dak Prescott, you have the leverage. We don't have a fallback plan. Trey Lance, doesn't seem like that's going to happen. Cooper Rush, certainly not, good for what he is, but certainly not the future of the Cowboys franchise. What about taking a shot at someone like Penix? He sits for a year behind Dak, and then you see enough growth from him. Maybe you say, all right, you're right, Dak, you can go hit free agency. We're not going to pay you $55-60 million a year to not win a Super Bowl, which he hasn't done yet.
See, I like that approach. In fact, that's what Jimmy Johnson did back when he drafted Troy Aikman. Then in the supplemental draft, he picked Steve Walsh as well. I like it from the standpoint of, okay, you're sitting there with Michael Penix, okay, and you get something resolved with Dak, whatever, you have him as a trade commodity as well. And the other thing, though, about that, with Trey Lance here, I think inside the building, we don't know for sure what they think about Trey Lance because he was acquired at the end of the preseason. We haven't seen him play in any games at all, including preseason games. They may think that they have a first-round pick from this draft in Trey Lance, in that he's the same age as many of these guys that are like Michael Penix, like Bo Nix. I mean, he's 23, 24 years old, like several of the prospects in this draft, including Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, I don't think there's if they have good faith, they start to believe that they have something in Lance, then that certainly opens things up for them in a variety of directions at 24. And if you're not going to go quarterback, if you're confident in Lance and you don't feel like you need to go Penix, or you're just in the back of your mind, Jerry Jones says, I'm going to pay Dak, even though it's going to pay me to do it at some point, like I'm just going to do it. Then, obviously offensive line took a hit here in free agency. I could see them taking someone like J.C. Latham, who maybe can kick inside and play guard initially, just like I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Smith. Tyler Smith.
Right. Yep. So, and then, hey, well, this isn't working, or no, we're going to kick him out to right tackle because Terrence Steele's not good enough. Whatever the case may be, like, it gives them options. They could also think wide receiver. Obviously, it's a very good wide receiver draft, and you can find guys later. I think in the first 3 rounds, people are going to be plucking starters left and right. But then you look at the CD Lamb scenario too and say, am I going to pay Dak 55? Am I going to pay CD 30? Because that's where the wide receiver contracts for the elite guys are going to. Like, can we afford to do that? Will we do that? Or do you look at it and say, now let's try Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU. Let's find AD Mitchell from Texas. Let's try to find the next guy and hope that 1 year he's working with CD, and then we see enough that we can say, all right, CD, man, we love you, but we're not giving you $100 million guaranteed to play wide receiver for us.
Giardi, you attended the Senior Bowl. You've mentioned that. You also were at the league meetings there in Orlando. Are there any other guys, prospects that are getting some buzz, whether it's first rounds, day 2 guys, day 3 guys that we should keep our eye on?
So for me, I wrote down 6 guys, and we're talking about various rounds, and some you've heard of. Ladd McConkey. I love Ladd McConkey. I think Ladd McConkey, if he can stay healthy, and he had a bit of an issue this year, a couple things with the ankle and the lower back at Georgia, I think he's going to be a high volume. Like, I think you're throwing the ball to him 7-8 times a game for the next 7-8 years. Like, I just think he's that kind of receiver. It tested way better athletically, I think, than people thought. But if you watch the tape, you would have seen it. It's there. Knows how to separate. Can do it with a plan. Can do it with his quickness. Can do it with his sneaky speed. He's not going to be a huge run after the catch guy in terms of, he's not breaking tackles. He's going to make people miss, but he's not breaking tackles. But I just think, like, he's not just a slot. They played him actually 70% of the time outside the numbers this year, versus people look at him and say he's a slot guy. He's more than that. So there's some versatility there where you don't feel like you have to be married to him in the slot only. He's probably, like, look, I could see him being a late first round pick. I could see Kansas City saying, you know what? This guy just knows how to play ball, right? And put him with our quarterback and his IQ and Ladd's IQ, and he's catching 80 to 100 passes for us for the next however many years. But certainly, like, early round 2, like, I almost see if he gets to Carolina at 33, like, they need to do whatever they can to boost Bryce Young's stock in that offense. He'd fit there. Roman Wilson from Michigan's another one. Again, they didn't throw the ball, as we've just discussed over and over again. Watched him at the Senior Bowl, came away thinking he was the second best receiver there behind McConkey. Went back and watched him and was like, yeah, this guy can play. And the same thing, more of a slot guy, but can still, because of the speed and because of the, got a variety of releases and strong enough to get off the line of scrimmage against press, that he could play outside as well. I'd be shocked if he gets out of the top 50. I think he's another, would it surprise me next year if he catches 60 passes for 800 yards? Nope, it wouldn't. I think he's got that kind of talent. Couple safeties I liked a lot. Cole Bishop, who was at the Senior Bowl from Utah, and Jaden Hicks from Washington State, who was not. They're 1 and 1A, 1A, 1B, whatever, however you want to phrase it at safety for me. What do you want? Bishop is he's like 6'3", more of a 2-deep type safety, but can play down in the box as well. And Hicks is kind of a destroyer who can get inside the box and is physical, and just, I like both of those guys. Both of them are probably, in that 80 to 100 range in terms of where they'll fall in the draft, unless someone's desperate for a safety. I know people think the safety class is weak, but I like both of those guys. I think if you end up with one of those guys, you're pretty well set there for a while. Elijah Jones, Boston College cornerback, tested off the charts. Go back and watch the tape. And again, BC not a very good program this year, but he's a baller. He can play. And I look at him, and I think a lot of people have him projected as a day 3 pick, and I think he should be a day 2 pick. Somewhere again in that third round, somewhere in the third round. To me, he fits, and he fits a lot of different places because he can play zone, he can play man, he can get in your face. He's got good length, he's got good speed. And I like Wiley, the tight end from TCU. He's 6'6", 6'7". He's 255, 260. If you watch him, saw him at the Senior Bowl. I liked him going into the Senior Bowl. I had watched him and was like, I like this guy. I'm going to keep a close eye on him. He moves like someone who's 6'3", 230, not 6'6", 6'7", 255, 260. Gets in and out of his breaks cleanly, quickly. Obviously at that size, he's a load. He's a big target as well. Has a good understanding when you watch him play zone of sort of finding the seams in zones, sitting down in zones. But then when you want to put a safety on him, they're giving up too much size. Like he's good. He's one of my top 2 or 3 tight ends in the whole thing. Like I really like him. And again, there's a bunch of different flavors at tight end this year. You have someone like Theo Johnson from Penn State who tested, his relative athletic score was like 997. It was something outrageous, but he has limited production. Again, Penn State's offense, kind of like Michigan's, like just not a lot going on there in terms of how they actually operate, but there's some physical gifts there. Sanders from Texas, obviously probably the number 1 tight end. Didn't test great, but if you watch on the tape, he plays faster than what his testing numbers were. So yeah, there's some good tight ends, even though again, it's not considered like a great high-end tight end draft like last year was. I think there's 3 or 4 guys that you could find in this draft that could be playing in this league for a long time.
And Jared Wiley, who started his career at Texas and then transferred to TCU, he ran a 4.62 at the combine. So.
Yeah, he. I'm telling you, he's a fun watch, man, and he's a monster of a human being. I was down on the field after one of the Senior Bowl practices, and I was like, dude, you should be playing like tackle. You could easily put on 40, 50 more pounds, and you're playing, left tackle in the league. But I guess when you run like that, take the glory positions and score some touchdowns instead.
Right, he's got the length, he's got the 6'6" frame, and as opposed to Sanders, he's 6'4", 245, and Wiley 6'6", and Sanders ran a 4.7 at the combine. So,
yeah.
Hey, now you've covered the Patriots for a good quarter century. You're there for the entire Belichick reign. So how different is it now with Giardi Mayo at the controls, and what's it like there now?
Major course correction. Trying to be incredibly media friendly to the point where it's actually got him in trouble a couple of times because they've said some things and then had to walk them back. They were going to, Giardi said in an interview early on, we're going to burn some cash in free agency. And then it turns out that they burned very little cash in free agency. In fact, I think only Washington has more cap room left at this point in terms of looking at the 2024-25 cap. There's questions like Elliott Wolf has still not been named the GM, and they're going to actually interview GMs after the draft. Now, I believe Elliott's the GM, and this is just a procedural thing. But I guess, until it's official, he's just the director of scouting. I was not at the combine, but of my friends that were there were like, you've never seen as many Patriot people out at Prime and the other high velocity and the other watering holes late at night, just singing like canaries about everything. So it's, that would have been frowned upon in previous regime. That is not the case right now. So I think there's still, there's going to be missteps. I said it with Mayo. I'm forgiving of them at this point because it's a whole different game from being a position coach who we talk to once every few weeks via Zoom versus now you're the face of the organization and you're the guy replacing Bill Belichick, and he's an excitable dude. So I think there's going to be moments where he's going to say some stuff that, I shouldn't have probably done that. I shouldn't have. Even at a moment at the league meetings, guys, there's a meme that was out there for years. Belichick pushes away the microphones at the league meeting and grabs his glass of orange juice and takes a sip of his orange juice. And it became a meme. It was a picture. And it's just like, whenever someone wanted to there's 2 Belichick memes that come up. The Belichick marching out of the tunnel, like, oh, Bill Belichick's coming for your player. This guy's a free agent. Someone would run that meme. And then there was this one where Belichick's making the face and he's drinking the OJ. So Mayo comes in and he takes a sip of the OJ and makes a joke about it. Like, oh yeah, me with the OJ. Like, and then I don't know, 5 minutes later, he accidentally knocks over the OJ. So I don't know if that's a sign of things to come, a bad sign of things to come, or just, one of those things. But he's like, geez, I even screwed up the joke. I knocked over the OJ. But so it's definitely been different. And it's been different from in terms of the player acquisition. They made it clear that they wanted to, unlike what Belichick had done for the last 10 years, we want to keep our guys. The guys that we identify as core players, the Patriots had not signed a top 3 pick, a first 3-round pick, to a second contract since 2013. Safety Duron Harmon was the last guy in the first 3 rounds to get a second contract. And this year, the Patriots, they gave Onwenu a contract. They gave Jennings a contract. Like, there's a handful of guys that they gave a second contract. They tagged Duggar. So they're saying, look, it's different now. Like, we're going to value our own guys more than the previous regime did, more than Bill did. And we're going to make sure that we take care of our own first and build from there. Now, whether that's a good strategy or not, I would have liked to have seen them do some more stuff outside of the organization, especially because they were 4-13. And a lot of these guys were in some way, shape, or form complicit in being 4-13. But that's just me. I think their feeling is like, these guys are going to be our core pieces. We're going to keep them around, and then we're going to try to build around it. So it's definitely been different, because that's not an approach that we've seen. You've watched a lot of guys that, and look, some of those draft picks were terrible anyways. You wouldn't want them on a second contract, right? But that was part of the problem of where they got to where they got, right? Why they had to spend, $200 million in free agency in 2021, because they had screwed so many drafts up that they had all these holes, and they had the COVID money to burn, and no one else did, so they burned it. And the owner's still complaining about that 3 years later, that he had to spend that much money, and he got one playoff appearance and lost by 30 points in the playoff game. So, didn't really work. And the old thing around here, guys, was that the stupid teams are the teams that spent money in free agency.
That's right. Yep.
You don't win games in April. You win games in November, December. We build for that. You guys all spending your money, you're idiots. And then when they spend money, oh, no. They're thinking ahead. Like, they knew that they knew COVID was coming. They knew that these teams were going to have money and the cap was going to go down and we were going to have all this money to burn. No, people twisted themselves into pretzels to make it work one way or the other. And I'm sure the same thing will happen now when they pick a quarterback at 3, or don't pick a quarterback at 3, or pick JJ McCarthy instead of Drake Maye or Jayden Daniels. You know how it works. They'll get, oh no, they're genius. They're showing you their next level. You watch, and we'll just have to see when they actually play games, when they matter.
Okay, as we merge our Boston audience with our Dallas audience here, I was thinking, knowing that you were going to be on the show, I was thinking of the comparison, Bill Belichick and Tom Landry. And I got to thinking, their careers are almost mirror images of themselves as far as their head coaching careers. In that, okay, you look at Belichick, and when he was at Cleveland and he was 500 or below as a head coach, then first year below 500 record as a head coach in New England. So there's about a 5-year period there. And then the Patriots, when they get Tom Brady at the helm at quarterback, okay, they go on a 19 years stretch where they had 19 straight winning seasons. And then the last 4 years, once Brady's gone, it's gone down, okay? You go back and look at Tom Landry's career with the Cowboys, and they had a 5-year stretch from 1960 to 1965 where they were a below 500 team. Starting in 1966 through 1985, they had 20 straight winning seasons, like a mirror image of what Belichick did with the Patriots. One difference being Belichick did it with one quarterback, and Landry had 4 different quarterbacks during that time. Of course, Staubach was the main one when they were going to Super Bowls and winning a couple in the 70s. And then, and I had to look this up, I didn't realize Landry was only 64 when Jerry Jones bought the team and fired him. And so at age 64, he could have gone, if he wanted to, go coach someplace else, whatever. As it turned out, he retired. He passed away about 11 years later, 2000, at age 75. So my question to you is, what about Belichick at age 71? I just think it's intriguing, those two head coaching careers and how much they are very similar. and in terms of success and from ebbs and flows, with a 2-decade winning streak in there. What do you think Belichick does now?
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because I think you can also throw Chuck Noll. I don't know that they mirror themselves exactly like that, but Noll at the end too is sort of a similar thing. Like, of all the great legendary coaches, Shula was the only one that was sort of still a winning coach at the end. He just didn't, they never won playoff games. They didn't win big games, but I think he was still like over 500 at the end, and it just was like, this isn't working anymore. We have to move on in a different direction. So much of what happened with Bill wasn't, there's a lot of personality stuff, obviously, the ego, the belief that, and they would tell you, no matter who you talk to, and they're like, it's the scheme, it's the coaching. Like, there was years ago, I forget which, if it was a Seth Wickersham story or whatever, like, basically they said, like, you give us the 15th best quarterback and we're going to win. So you got Mac Jones, who I think most people thought at his ceiling was probably going to be a middle of the road quarterback. And you had the 1 year where you won 10-7 and lost in the playoffs by 30 points. And then since then, the massive drop off, and such to the point that he was unplayable at the end of the year. And it was like, well, I thought you said you could win with the 15th best quarterback. I thought you said you could win with, the because of scheme and because of, well, we'll coach this guy up. He's an average player, but when we get our hands on him, he'll become above average, or, we'll find the thing that he does really well. We'll maximize that. And then all of a sudden you're like, who's this guy? Where did only Belichick and his staff could get this out of that player. And the way they neglected the offense, and really the neglecting of the offense goes back to the last couple of years that Brady was there as well, which is one of the reasons why, well, there's many reasons why Brady wanted to move on, but that was certainly one of them. Like, you can't keep trotting me out there with, fossils at receiver, Julian Edelman on one knee, and, we're bringing back Chris Hogan, and, he runs one route, and like, I can elevate them to a point, but we're not going to get to the point where we want to be, which is, the thing that we've done for all these years, which is AFC championship games and Super Bowls. And so that neglect, I think, started right around 2017. I think it started to really come to a head. They punted on the COVID year. Cam Newton, Demir Bird was one of their better receivers that year. Like, I mean, that was to me, that was the beginning, right? Because it just felt like, well, if everybody else could get it together for that year, and you guys didn't even almost try to get it together, it didn't really make a lot of sense. Spent all the money in 2021, but that team clearly had flaws. Their big 7-game win streak came when they were playing backup quarterbacks, and so like it was a bit of fool's gold when they became the number 1 seed in the AFC in early December. And then after that, I think they lost 4 of their final 5 and lost a couple of them in bad fashion. And then, so many times in the last 2 years, I would come away from a game and say to myself, they're doing all the things that the other teams used to do when they were at the height of their powers. The other teams are just sitting there waiting for you to make a mistake because it's coming. You're going to make the mistake. And that's what the Patriots did for all those years. They put so much pressure on you that you just eventually were like, we have to be perfect. And they couldn't be perfect. And then there's the turnover. There's the big mistake. Brady, of course, immediately turns it around. They score a touchdown, the dagger, blah, blah, blah. Momentum switches, game over. This group they were so not talented, so it didn't even matter. Like, they were going to make the mistake anyway, but they became the dumb team that you had for years been like, they're dumb. We'll put pressure on them. They'll screw it up. They became that team. And you have to start with a coach. Like, you set the tone for the whole thing, and you pride yourself on being smarter than everyone else and having a system that's better than everyone else. And turns out you do need players. You do need a quarterback. You can't put 2 defensive guys and a special teams guy in charge of your offense in 2022 and think that that's going to work. Like, he just got really cocky and arrogant and stubborn, and he didn't have Tom Brady to cover it up anymore. And I wonder now, like, I think a lot of us thought he'd get a job. And then as you sort of went along in the process, and I was thinking about it more and talking to some people around the league, it's like, well, he's 72 when the season starts. How many years is he going to do it? You're going to turn everything over to him. And, I know Atlanta said, like, he said he would work with Fontenot and these sorts of things, but like, is that really going to be an equitable relationship? Or is it, I'm Bill Belichick, this is how we do it, you're going to do it my way, or we're going to have a bad relationship, and then, the whole thing's not going to work anyway. So I wonder now, like a full year out of it, he'll be 73 to start the next season. Like, does someone want to take that on for 3 years maximum, right? And it's not as if you put him in charge now and you go, well, then, he'll bring McDaniels with him, and then McDaniels will become the next head coach. Well, we've already seen that. It hasn't worked twice. We saw Patricia. That didn't work. Like Charlie Weiss, Romeo Crennel, like on and on it goes. The tree hasn't produced fruit. So when you go from Bill Belichick, if you have him for 2 or 3 years, you don't have an in-house successor where you don't have that guy that's going to run the program anymore. So I don't know. It makes me wonder if it is in fact over.
Not only are there a lot of coaching changes there in New England, but a lot of roster turnover as well, Giardi, especially with some of the bigger names leaving this offseason, either retiring or just headed out. We mentioned Mac Jones, Lawrence Guy, Matt Slater. Which offseason moves of the Patriots have you liked, and then which ones do you think could kind of come back to cost them during the season here?
So it's, I guess, when you look at the guard market or the offensive line market, paying Mike Onwenu what they paid Mike Onwenu isn't crazy, because that's just the way the market's going. He's not an elite player, but he's a good player, and I felt like they couldn't lose him. Their offensive line has been in flux for multiple years. Onwenu and David Andrews, the center, have been the two cornerstones of it, the two guys that you can depend on. Onwenu was a right guard. They had to move him to right tackle halfway through the season because their tackle play was abhorrent. And he did a fine job. Like he did a fine job. He's not going to be a great tackle, but he settled things down for them. And I have a feeling he's going to start out at tackle again this year, because I just think, we're paying you a lot of money. Probably going to pay you more to play out there than inside. But just in general, like, if you train for it for a year, he's a good enough player. He's a smart enough player that he should be better at the position. So to me, that was one they couldn't let get out the door, because I just didn't think there's going to be more upheaval. They don't, Trent Brown's gone, and that actually I think is addition by subtraction. But like, they're still going to have to find a left tackle. They're going to have to find somebody to play there. Their left guard, Cole Strange, blew out his knee late in the year. I haven't heard anything about him in terms of where his recovery is at. I would assume he's not going to be ready to go to start the season. So you're going to be looking for a left guard as well. And Andrews is probably entering, I would guess, even though he's playing well, this might be it for him in terms of his career. So maybe one more year of him at center. So having somebody back there as sort of a staple in the offensive line is key. I didn't love the transition tag for Duggar. He hasn't signed it yet. He thinks he's worth a lot more than they think he's worth, which is why they put the tag on him and said, hey, go find it. But the transition tag is very limiting. It's like you get 7 days to match it. So it's a big number, 13.8. And as we saw, there's a bunch of safeties got cut this year, which it's funny. When they started getting cut, I was like, well, so they kind of nailed the market. They're like, we're not going to pay you this much. And now I'm actually thinking to myself, they're overpaying him, because I think his value on the open market is probably less than $10 million. But I think he still sees himself as sort of a Minka Fitzpatrick sort of like influence of, and he's not that. He's a good player. Don't get me wrong. Like, he's a good player. You want him on your team. It's just the money and what he brings, they don't mesh. And I'm just curious, because I know he wasn't happy to get tagged. His people weren't happy. They didn't even know it was coming. There wasn't even something that had been apparently discussed prior to him getting the tag, and that the transition tag rarely gets used. I think it's been used 5 times in the last 15 years. So I think there's some hard feelings there. So we'll see how that gets figured out between now and the start of off-season activities, which is right around the corner. They're actually starting next week. And then obviously the mandatory stuff doesn't start until early June with the mandatory minicamp. But that's one that I felt like I actually thought, and I say this, I had it right beforehand. I said, look, I wouldn't have tagged him, and I would have taken half that money and thrown it at Quandre Diggs for 1 year, someone like that, a veteran. We're just going to get 1 year out of this guy, but like, we'll pay him half the money that we're going to, and then I'm going to take the rest of that money and I was going to put it into Calvin Ridley's offer. And I know Calvin Ridley got overpaid, but as having watched this offense for the last 4 years beyond, they don't have anyone that that defenses have to plan for. There's no one who tilts the field in one direction or another. And in Ridley, it's an overpay, yet it's not, because you're not giving up picks. Like everyone's now people are talking about, well, no, you trade for Brandon Ayuk or trade for T. Higgins. I'm like, okay, well, I talk to people in the league who think Ayuk's worth a first. If that's going to happen, that it would take a first. But let's just say they can't find a first and they take your high second and maybe another pick later on. Okay, so you're going to tell me in this draft where you need a quarterback, multiple wide receivers, and a tackle that you're going to trade one of those valuable picks and a rookie contract for someone that is in the last year of his deal and that you're going to have to turn around and pay $30 million a year for going forward, which is, I mean, look, that's the way the league's going. So you're probably going to have to trend in that direction at some point. But like, it just seems like too soon for that, too soon in the build for that or the rebuild for that. Whereas if it's Ridley, it's just a check. You know, I mean, when you look at the Ridley thing, again, even though it's outrageous, 2 years from now it won't be outrageous because there'll be 10 more guys that get bigger deals than that. You're not giving up draft picks. You're just giving them money. And if you look at the structure of that deal, it's basically $46.5 million guaranteed for the first 2 years. And then there's another 3.5 attached to the third year, but you can pretty much walk away. You can eat $3.5 million, especially with the cap's going to be like $300 million by then, right? Like, I'd have just kept throwing money at him. And maybe he didn't want to come here. You know, Robert Kraft mistakenly, or shouldn't have said, but he said like his girlfriend, actually his wife, didn't want to come up here. I don't know why you want to put that out there, whether that's true or not. And Ridley's always been in the South. You know, his whole college professional career has been in that direction. Yeah, the income tax, the state income tax thing too as well. But the Patriots said they would pick that up. I'd have just said, here's $55 million, dude. Can you say no? And if he says no, okay, then we really put our best effort forth. Instead, I think they offered about $40 million guaranteed, and that wasn't going to get it done in this market.
As we wrap this thing up, just hearing where the Patriots are and just looking at where they are post Tom Brady, I've got a suggestion to Jerry Jones. He needs to talk to Mike Giardi, and when he is thinking about the signing Dak to a contract extension, just underscore the importance of having a quarterback. Dak is no Tom Brady, but they have had 3 straight 12-win seasons, and you can be in a whole lot worse place than where you are right now.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like it's okay. Like to a certain degree, I get the Cam Newton thing. That one transition year, you needed a big personality to sort of fill Tom's shoes, and even if he couldn't play anymore, like he's going to be able to take some of the weight. You didn't want to throw a rookie quarterback in there and just be like, you're the guy that's replacing Tom Brady. At least Mac Jones had the 1 year removed from that whole scenario. But you go around the league and it's just like what's Minnesota's plan? Like, for instance, if they can't get up there in the 5, if for whatever reason, like it falls through, they can't get up in the 5, and they're picking at 11, they're going to pick Bo Nix. You're going to pick Penix with the 2 ACLs and the shoulder injury. You know, 3 of his 5 college seasons or whatever ended with injury. Like, it's risky. You know, you had Kirk Cousins. He's not great. He doesn't suck either. You know, you can win some games with him, and maybe that 1 year falls into place, and you win the whole damn thing. Look at Stafford. Like, I like Stafford a lot, but you would kind of consider him not on that top tier. Well, he got to the Rams. They had the right pieces. It fit for him, and he had an awesome year, and they won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Why couldn't that happen with someone like Kirk Cousins or with Dak Prescott? I think that's the thing you have to consider.
And on the flip side of it, with Jared Goff going to Detroit, and now they're the team he's got around him now, and he's been to a Super Bowl with the Rams, didn't win it, lost to the Patriots, but you know, you got to get that quarterback right. All right, one final thing, would you recommend to Jerry Jones, after seeing Zeke Elliott last season, that, at an economical deal, Zeke's got something left in the tank and he can help you?
100%. He was revelation is probably too strong a word, but he played really well for them. You know, he slowed down a little bit at the end of the year, but that's because Stevenson was hurt, and they were splitting carries. And he became not only was he the first and second down back, but he was also the third down back. And I think near the end of the year, it may have worn on him a little bit. But I'll tell you what, the first 8-10 weeks, he had great burst. and he did a hell of a job catching the ball out of the backfield. Look at the Christmas Eve game in Denver, like check down, bunch of catches, bunch of big plays, made a hustle play, forced a fumble. Like he did some really good things for this team, and well thought of by the guys around him. To me, I know a lot of Patriot fans were like, he's got to, they got to bring him back, and I'm like, I don't think he wants to come back. I think he wants to go back to Dallas. I think that was the feeling throughout the years, that he wanted to be back in Dallas. So I think if they can make that work, they should make it work, because he's definitely still got some juice in those legs.
I feel the same way. Well, this has been great, Mike. I love it. I want to go now look at your Boston Sports Journal mock draft and the mock drafts to come here in the next 3 weeks.
Absolutely. That was fun to do. And there's going to be some ones that have trades in them, and we're going to, we'll do different things. But I like being able to look at it from that picture and go down the line and say, all right, well, it's not just about like who's the best player. It's the needs. What did you do in free agency? What haven't you done in free agency? Hey, who's up next year that you might not be able to keep? CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, like all those sorts of things that you have to kind of consider when you go through the process. And it's kind of informative to maybe where teams might end up, choosing on day one.
Well, Giardi, appreciate your time, man. So much great info. I wrote down like a ton of your names, all your 6 draft prospects. I'm going to go back and look at all those guys. We appreciate you. We appreciate your time, your support. And anybody at home can follow at Mike Giardi on Twitter. So, man, thanks so much. And can't wait to have you back on here.
Appreciate you guys. Be well.
All right. Very good, Mike. And Cody will have Babe Laufenberg on in here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's the plan. We're going to talk some quarterbacks. I know Babe's been breaking them down, so can't wait to discuss JJ McCarthy for another 30 minutes, as if this one wasn't enough. More JJ.
I can't get enough. I can't get enough. And by the way, I noticed we had more downloads come draft season than before. It's like 3,400 downloads, Cody. You're doing a great job.
Hey, it's Giardi, it's Babe, it's all those guys.
Right.
I'm just part of the team here, doing my thing, trying to do my thing.
Just a cog in the machine.
Exactly.
There you go. All right, Giardi, I appreciate it. And that does it for this week. And we will see you again next time here on Jonesing
for Football. See you guys.